Alright everyone, it's time for another deck profile on Booster Set 7 for Overdress, this time on the Drajeweled deck. And so far I've been really liking the deck and the design of Drajeweled ever since the trial deck came out. And the trial deck came out before Set 6, but this Drajeweled came in at Set 7, which actually pissed me off. I don't know why they did that, and that basically made us wait for one set for the actual Drajeweled stuff. But we finally got it, and I've been very excited to play the deck ever since they introduced Drajeweled in the trial deck, because I do like its style and the design of it. And I've been wanting an actual cool Dark State decks, and I finally got it because I love dragons and I'm a sucker for dragons. So what do I think about the deck? It's just fun, basically. And I like the aspect of soul blasting different grades, aka the gems on its artwork. You see 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each gem is basically one different grade for the deck, and that's the representation here. And I think it's just a cool aspect, and I like the style of it. But I would say this deck is actually pretty generic to play. Not too expensive, you could say. You could probably build it for like 100, but overall just a cool, fun deck so far. Of course, this is Set 7 Drajeweled, which basically is more of an introduction for Drajeweled, which of course does lack some stuff, but it's generic enough that you could basically use many different cards. Now, few weaknesses I have found with the deck, and actually it's the main problem I have the deck with so far. Countercharging. This deck uses quite a bit of counterblast and there's no way to countercharge. Sure, there's ways to control it, but other than that, countercharge has been a bit of the issue for this deck. But other than that, I don't see really much problems with the deck. Maybe hand size and the deck size can be controlled because it doesn't soul charge overly too much, and you do have drop soul and soul charging. So there is that. It's just the counterblast problem. But anyway, to the deck. We of course start off with the Ride deck with Julius Draco Kid because Drajeweled Ride Light. And then we go to Jewel Core Dragon, which when you rode upon it with Drajeweled, the grade 2, you call it to rearguard, which it goes to the second skill where when this card attacks or boosts plus 5k power on that battle, and then at the end of the battle you put it back to soul. And the ability is mandatory, which is fine because you want it in your soul. The goal of this deck is that you want different grades in soul and 4 different ones at that. And then we go to Demonic Stone Dragon Drajeweled, which when an attack hits you can soul charge 1, just helps. And then the second skill, when you ride it with a Drajeweled, you can soul charge 1, and then you have 3 or more cards with different grades, draw a card. Which will happen because when you ride grade 3 on top of it, you have grade 2, 1, and 0, because Drajeweled will still go back to soul. So that shouldn't even be a problem right there. In which you go to your main grade 3, Demonic Jewel Dragon Drajeweled. So the first skill is that its act once per turn, counterblast 1, soul charge 2. If you soul charge 2 cards with different grades, you draw a card, and that will be a theme with Drajeweled because you want different grades. Especially the second skill where it's the main skill when this card attacks a Vanguard. You soul blast 4 cards with different grades and choose one of your opponent's Vanguards and change its power to 1. That could nullify the trigger power. That's very important. And then if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, crit plus 1. So in a way, it minuses them 10k in a way, and can nullify trigger power as well. And the extra crit just adds some pressure. Of course, it's just simple right there. Nothing super special, but the nullifying trigger part can be very nasty. And that's kind of why I kind of like Drajeweled. I just like the style of that. Soul blasting 4 different grades, so there's just some unique mechanic right there. And now to the main deck. Persona Ride, you have to run your other 3 copies. And then we got Riscal Galer. So when this card attacks, if you soul blast 4 more cards with different grades during the turn, you can put a card from your hand to soul, draw a card, and choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. Yep, it's basically free, and it basically lets you control what grades you have in soul. Very important. And also removal is also very nice. Don't use it too often, but it's there. And then we got Heat Maze Acrobat Microslava. When placed from hand during your main phase, choose a card with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard. If it's a grade 2 or less card, you call it. If it's not, you put it in your hand and this card gets 5k. So basically you can reuse your Persona Ride if you need it. You're not going to do this too often because you do want specific grades in soul, so you don't want to exactly lose it, but it's there for resources if you need it. So that's it for the grade 3s. To the grade 2s, first off we got Demonic Stone Dragon Rockagird, which when this card attacks a grade 3 or greater, and you have 4 more cards with different grades in soul, this card gets 10k power to the end turn. And yes, I have managed to get 4 more cards with different grades in soul in the first attack, obviously, and the second attack as well. because sometimes you have duplicate grades in your soul. And yeah, that power gain does help. And especially with the second skill, where if you soul blast 4 more cards with different grades during the turn with your Vanguard, and after this card attacks a grade 3 or greater, you can counterblast 1 to restand this unit. And that restand can be very nasty, especially with Drajeweled changing your opponent's Vanguard to 1. And if you can regain 10k grade, that makes it even more nasty. So yeah, no reason not to run 4. Of course, this is more of a go in second card. And then, to probably the most useful grade 2 of the deck, funny enough, and it's not like the best one, is Demonic Stone Dragon Matehara. On place on rearguard, you can counterblast 1, choose a card from your drop zone, and put it to soul. And this card gets plus 10k power. You have soul with 4 or more different grades. Yeah, you can choice soul charge from the drop zone. Generic. Plus 10k. Yep, pretty good. No reason not to run this. And then for the last grade 2, which you can literally run anything, but I found this card probably the best one, is Unshroud Shuri. On place on rearguard, you can counterblast 1, look at top 3 cards from your deck, choose 1 card from among them, and put it to your soul. And then, if your soul has 4 more cards with different grades, you draw a card. So, choice soul charging plus draw. Very nice. And it's kind of better than using the Drajeweled random soul charging, but in a way, Drajeweled random soul charging gives you 2 soul, which is probably better at the same time. But it's just there if you need it, and it gives you extra draw power. There are other better options, probably, but I can't really think of it right now, so I'm just using this. So that's it for the grade 2 lineup. To the grade 1 lineup, Power Gem Dragon. So when this card is boosting, while you still blasted 4 more cards with your Vanguards this turn, you can counterblast 1, look at top 2 cards of your deck, choose 1 to put to your hand, and put the other 1 in soul. Basically, it gives you another card and another soul. Very nice. But the main issue so far with this deck is still the counterblast based on what I notice, which is why I have a little bit of a 3-3 split going on. Because I do like having this card over the next card, but because of the counterblast issue, I kind of had to cut it down to 3. So there is that, but overall I just do like it. In which the other card that I'm running 3 of is Valkyrie Performer. So when this card boosts, you can choose a card from your drop zone, and if your soul does not have that grade of the chosen card, you can put it to soul. Basically, free choice soul charging for different grades. And yeah, this does come up. You can boost this with Drajeweled and then put the missing grade, or you could do it the other way around, use Drajeweled and then put the missing grade. It's just free, that's why this card is just good. That's why this card is just good for that. The only thing is, it doesn't come up every single time and doesn't come up super too often. Probably average once per turn usually. So there's no reason to run too many of these at the same time because it's free right now and there's no countercharging. It's a split with Power Gem. And then, because I don't have Brainwash Swirler, and Brainwash Swirler is expensive, I could run Gumnum Ram, but because I'm not going to use Gumnum Ram Soul Blast 3 to draw, I'm going to decide to run Friend of the Netherworld Ling, which on place you can look at 2 cards for your deck, choose 1 card and put it to soul, put the other to the bottom. Basically just more choice soul charging, which is probably more important than the random one. Because of that, I chose this over Gumnum Ram, and I don't have Swirler because that's expensive. So this card it is. If there's any other better options I could run to balance out my grade lineup, basically I want like even split on each grade lineup I have, go ahead and tell me. And finally, 4 PGs, no questions asked. And of course the Blitz Order one. And now for the trigger lineup. Over trigger, because it is necessary until it gets hit. You've got 8 crits because pressure deck. 3 draws because you do want to draw, and this deck doesn't soul charge heavy enough for it to deck out fast enough. And then 4 heals, of course, with the counter heal. So that's it for this deck profile on my Drajeweled deck. What do you guys think of it? What other cards would you recommend? Like I said, I have few generic cards that I could practically replace for a different better card if there's any, or at least if I could think of it, and that is also a budget option because I'm not going to be paying like over $20 per generic card that is not super necessary like Swirler when there's alternatives for that one. So go ahead and tell me any other suggestions that could be budget friendly enough and also decent. But other than that, what do you guys think about the deck? Overall, I have fun with it. I just like its style. I like the design. Drajeweled just looks awesome. This is now my main Dark State deck because of it. Dragons, I'm a sucker for that. But other than that, I just like the style of it. The Soul Blast 4 different grades just make it quite interesting because now you have to control your soul for all that. Because now you have to learn how to control your soul, which is something a little more interesting that I kind of like. Especially you need the 4 different grades, so you kind of have to balance your grade lineup a bit too. So overall, it's just fun. But like I said, it still lacks a countercharging problem, and there is that one grade 2 for Burrow Magnus, but it doesn't really reach 10 souls, so that is a little bit of a problem. If there's a countercharger that you guys can think of for me, go ahead and tell me down below. And I mean like something easily achievable that is good for the deck. But that's it for this, and see you all next time.